Hi Tolmeia. Nice to meet
Hi.
you. Uh,
Uh,
so Tolmeia, I want to ask, welcome to the Follow Us On podcast. And in this podcast, we talk about some of the issues in the world. And the reason why I invited you to this podcast is because you're a climate justice activist, and I want to talk to you about climate change and find out really we are technically approaching this problem, the biggest problem of uh, that exists today, uh, existential wise. And I'm so glad you're here.
yeah, thank you for having me.
um, you are a digital artist. You're also a podcaster, and in your podcast, Idealistically Pod, you talk about what you want in an ideal world. And I just want to ask you, like, what do you want in an ideal world? That's my first question.
It's a good question. And through my podcast where I basically asked my guests that exact question, I'm kind of getting more of a feel of what I actually want. And I think really like the main thing is I want, sorry, my throat's fit.
No worries.
The main thing that I want, I think, is just the for everyone to have more time to just do what makes them happy and to bring joy to people's lives. I don't think I when I think of that question, I don't think of kind of like, I don't know, a Green New Deal or whatever, because although
Mhm.
something like that is great, it doesn't kind of encapsulate the kind of feeling and what actually that means for people. And yeah, I think I just want people to have time to enjoy their lives and not always be working constantly or, playing by other people's rules and stuff like that. Just having time and freedom to live life in a healthy and happy way, basically.
Yeah, because for you, you wanted to be a fashion designer when you
Yeah.
but then it changed. Like your dreams kind of changed, and I think I guess with climate change that many people's dreams have changed. They want to
Yeah.
achieve something in life, but then we have this issue in front of us, and then many of us have to um, depart from our dreams to do uh, climate activist stuff or to make change in the world. And I just want to ask you, like, why what is like the one thing that made you want to switch from being a fashion designer? I heard that it was like you watched a True Cost documentary, and yeah.
Yeah. That's often the moment that I refer to as kind of like my light bulb moment. As the starting point for kind of my education around sustainability, especially related to fashion. And I wouldn't say there was like another moment that made me think, oh, I'm not going to be a fashion designer anymore. I think it was just going on that education journey and just gradually learning more and more about the climate crisis that made me realize that that's what I wanted to put my energy into and that I wasn't necessarily needed in that way right now. Like
Mm.
the world doesn't need more clothes. The world doesn't need me to make more clothes. So I'm gonna focus on tackling this in whatever way feels right to me. And hopefully still, being creative with it, which is obviously why I'm also an artist. Like I don't want to let go of that part of my passion for creating and
Yeah.
designing things.
So you kind of like merged your two passions together to make it a more to kind of like you're kind of like saving the world, but you're also doing what you like.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's
Yeah.
the way it should be, like for everyone who wants to get involved with climate stuff, is finding what you're already passionate about. Like whether you're, I don't know, maybe you're on a football team and you could
Yeah.
make sure that your team isn't sponsored by planet killing companies, or whether you're an accountant and you know how to use spreadsheets and you could help out like a climate organization, be a volunteer for them in managing their finances and things like that. So there are so many ways that you can take what you're already doing and apply it to something like the climate crisis.
Yeah, but like I feel like also like a lot of people are don't think too much ahead of the future, which is kind of great in a way. But then, like for example, like with climate change, I always like most of the time, I'm not currently affected by climate change. Like in terms of that, I don't think about it daily on day-to-day basis. or like, oh, is it going to be too hot today, or is it going to be a flood? My location, but because I'm currently in the UK and in Edinburgh, and it's kind of fine here, it's not too bad. But uh, I feel like many people right now don't think of it as a problem, and it's kind of like represents humanity, because like we kind of like wait towards the end, and then we react to stuff more than act to stuff. Like we always react to problems, but then how do you like change the psychological aspect of, like, how do you convince people that you have to act now?
Yeah.
Because I think
I
that's the
think
hardest part of the job.
Yeah, I think it is looking at it from that like personal perspective. Like maybe you obviously, yes, we're both in the UK and we are in a privileged position where it's not a direct threat all the time. But also, we had three named
Yeah, storms.
storms
Yeah.
in 1 week, and people's homes were flooded. A couple of people lost their lives. So it's not like we're not impacted by it. So I think we can make it personal, and we can show how it does impact our lives, even if it's not a flood or a storm. We can be like, okay, but what kind of job are you working, and how does that job impact the climate, or um you know health implications, like people who suffer with asthma, it might be worse because of the pollution in the area that they're living. So I think if you're in a position or in a location like the UK where it might not seem here and now, actually highlighting the ways that it is one way to kind of get people thinking, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you're part of Extinction Rebellion as well, and it's a movement that changes, that is pushing for more change and demanding for more right now. How do you like? I see Extinction Rebellion all the time, and I really am inspired by you guys and your demands. For example, like reaching net zero by 2025, I think that's one of your demands. But like, I feel like going back to my previous point, like many people are not seeing, are not thinking clearly in terms of that, or they don't think of it as an immediate problem,
Mm.
and they're always thinking of uh, okay, we have other priorities now. We're going to focus on what's happening right now, and then maybe later we'll focus on this. Like, how do you convince like people, especially like in power, like in like those governments, and to make those differences as soon as possible in a way that also benefits them, kind of, because like I
Yeah.
don't think they'll make change unless it sees, oh, okay, they see benefit to what their agenda or anything like that. So
Yeah, that's really tricky. And I will say, I'm not a part of XR anymore, just because
oh.
I have found, like, just locally, like I haven't felt as empowered, for various different reasons. But I think it's still an incredible movement, and has really, like, especially in the UK, like driven the climate conversation like so much further than it was going previously. But yeah, it's such a tricky question of how you get people engaged, especially on like a decision making level. And I'm still not sure how. Especially like in the UK, where we have the Conservative Party, who just their values are so completely opposite to what we
Hmm.
need in order to enact like climate action and climate justice, especially like just right now with the situation in Ukraine, and seeing how they're dealing
Yeah.
with that, putting up Ukrainian flags outside of Downing Street or whatever, but then not actually allowing people to easily come into the UK. Like,
Yeah.
the climate crisis is a threat multiplier. So if we have the climate crisis going on at the same time
Yeah.
as a war, if we're not doing things like letting people into our country whilst that's happening, that's not climate justice. And so that's why I find it really difficult to then engage with people who have those sorts of beliefs and those values, because I don't actually know, like within me, that's completely the
Hmm.
wrong moral and mindset to have. So I still struggle with that question of like, how do you engage on that level? Because especially when they're so completely different to you in mindset.
Yeah, because like I'm pretty sure like with the climate crisis, there's going to be even more refugees and people wanting to come because their place, their home is not like is being destroyed, or it's not habitable anymore. And obviously with war again, there's more refugees, and even climate change can instigate wars as well for
Yeah,
resources and etc. So it's like goes all in the cycle. Uh,
exactly.
and yeah, but in the last few years, I think it's been very weird because like we had COVID come in, and now we have this Russia-Ukraine war. But it almost seems that we're going backwards in terms of we can't like climate change is like taking a step backwards like from our priorities. We don't think about when COVID came,
Mm,
like okay, COVID is we have to find a way through COVID. Now we have this Russia-Ukraine war. People, countries are fighting against each other, uh, and we're basically supposed to be uniting at this time. We're supposed to be
yeah.
together. Uh, so how do you feel about all this? Like, and how do you feel like? How do you have like so much hope, or where do you get hope from, or
Yeah, like I said, like I was saying, like it's a threat multiplier. So everything that's bad that's happening will be worse because of climate change if we don't deal with climate
yeah,
change. Like for example, right now I think in Australia there's terrible floods, and that's
mm,
barely capturing our attention because we have other things happening.
yeah,
Um, and so it's like it's not like it goes away, like it's still there and it's getting worse the less we don't think about it. And I think like on a kind of just individual people level, part of the reason we can't focus on it at the same time as other things is because it it can be crippling, like to think
mm,
about it at the same time. You know, like thinking about a pandemic, thinking about a war, thinking about climate change, something that again is not necessarily here for everyone, but feels very kind of like impending doom. Like that's a lot. It's a lot to take
yeah,
on, and just goes to show how like our way of living and our societies and our systems are failing us because we have
mm,
to deal with this all at the same time. Um, and in terms of how do I find hope and how am I so hopeful? I don't know if I am. Like,
uh,
I think if people, you know, who know me, like close to me, probably don't
mm,
actually see me as that much of a hopeful person because I talk a lot about how I'm really scared about the world and stuff like that. And so I do often touch on that more publicly, but I think for the sake of other people, I can't always show that because
mm,
I don't want to, you know, deflate anyone else and I don't want to stop anyone else getting involved in the movement or taking part. And so there has to be a sense of hope in that way. And a lot of time I get that from taking action, especially with other
yeah,
people, like doing it on my own.
mm,
Before I found movements like Extinction Rebellion, I felt really disempowered. Like I was like, oh, I can't do this. But then you sit in a room with 30 odd people who feel the
yeah,
same way and you feel less alone. Or you go to a protest with thousands of other people and you realize, I'm not the only one who cares.
yeah.
So I'd say that is probably what gives me the most hope, if I have any.
The sense of community, like that you're not going through this alone. That
Yeah.
like, yeah, um, like we're just talking about uh climate anxiety. Like,
Mm.
I guess like when I was in 2019 or something, like I think that's the first time I actually started thinking about climate change as a problem. Like before that, I was just doing uni, living normally. And then I started thinking about climate change, and I really wanted to do something about it, but I was really anxious. And how do you like like is that sense of community, apart from sense of community, like how else do you deal with like climate anxiety, and like what do you do?
I think like first of all, like any kind of anxiety, like you're told not to try and fight it. Like don't try and push it down, don't try and ignore it. Like the thing you have to do is to just sit with it and let it pass.
Mm,
And it feels like the opposite of what you want to be doing. Like you want to get rid of it as fast as possible, but actually by doing that you're not processing it and acknowledging what's causing it. And so yeah, I've done things like I have a climate anxiety journal, which is literally if I feel terrible about the world, I will write in that book, and that is designated to those feelings. And actually, I think it helps accept that it's as big as a problem as it is, and that also it's a very human response to what is happening. Like essentially, the climate crisis and the biodiversity emergency and things like that. Like it's losing our home in some way and losing what we know and what is within us as humans and as creatures of the world.
yeah,
Like seeing it being destroyed is obviously going to be horrible and is going to fill us with sadness and anger. And so actually accepting those feelings and giving space to them, I think, is one of the most important things you can do. But also don't latch on to one feeling for too long. For example, like anger is a very powerful feeling, but it can also be exhausting if you cling on to that for too long. And sadness can also be very tiring. And so let it pass, but also search for things that can shift that anger into action or that sadness into hope.
Does like being in like a nature environment like help you? Like, because I see that you, I think in a blog post, I think you say you go back home sometimes and then you're in the nature, and then you just clear your mind. There's,
Yeah, I think especially for a lot of people, like through COVID and lockdowns and stuff, like nature was one of the only places we could go if we had access to it, which is in some cases a privilege. And so yeah, especially during those times, like I just go and the only hug I could get was from a tree. So I became a tree hugger and I was quite proud of it. And yeah, definitely, like I think nature, again, I think because it's just so inherent within us as humans, if you strip back everything else that we've become accustomed to, like our love for nature is there and we just have to find our way back to it, I think.
this is just like a out of the world question, but like, what do you think about like settling down on another planet? Like, I felt like it just came across my mind, but like like we have this home right now, and many countries in the world are trying to uh not many countries, like a lot of companies out there, like SpaceX, everyone trying to like get to Mars and living on our countries and focusing on that. But do you think that's like one of the only solutions we have, like in terms of like if you want humanity to like, you know, let's say, I don't know, like be able to like survive, and do you think that interplanetary like this is
I would hope not. Like I really hope not. And I personally think like those, I think looking into space and learning about it, all cool, but putting our hopes of survival on it is a big distraction from what we could just change down here. Like we have all the solutions. We have the especially within like general populations, the political will to change it. And so I think it's a major distraction and is honestly a very, very, very small percentage of people who think that is the solution.
I don't think we have like the will to, you know, like I think we all have the will, like humanity has this will to like want to be on a high level, to think they want to be technologically advanced, they want to be able to do things that like an insect can't do. They want to be able to uh let's say, like, you know, go to space, do different things, like visit different planets and all that stuff. uh Almost seems like staying at home feels kind of weird. And uh living in a sustainable, like the sustainability side, people are not very attracted to it. We are most attracted to things that excite us, and people are very attracted to, not as attracted to like sustainability or things like that. And I think that's why we are more interested in going to space and then actually fixing the problems that we have down here. I think that's a big issue, where we have not being able to focus on the problems at home. We want to try to ignore it. We want to do other cool stuff.
I think that majorly speaks to like our culture and the media and stuff like that though. Like if you think about the sorts of films and TV shows and stuff that we watch that focus on, like super like sci-fi, high-tech solutions to dystopia and stuff, like that's what we're being fed, like that's what we watch and what we enjoy. And so that versus something which is full of nature, and like nature just hasn't been given time and the space to actually kind of infiltrate our minds and become desirable, I think. I read a book called Earth Emotions, which basically goes into what it says on the tin, like emotions to do with the planet. And it goes into how the film Avatar, a lot of people came out of
Mm,
watching that and actually felt kind of feelings of like almost climate anxiety, because
mm,
it was watching a world that was so in tune with nature and its surroundings being destroyed by humans.
yeah.
And so I think that's really interesting to think about, is that actually, like, we just need to see it more.
Yeah, those kind
And
of
we need
films.
to see films like Avatar, which don't have humans going in to destroy it, but have humans going in and like learning how to live with nature and stuff like
Mm.
that. So I think if we actually started making it more attractive, we would be less focused on those visions of the future.
Like cultural shift in movies, TV shows.
Yeah.
More than just Sir David Attenborough documentaries, something else.
Yeah.
Those will kind of help. I just want to talk about fashion in a sense, because you're going back, like you wanted to be a fashion designer, and then you switch from being that, and then uh not exactly, but you like didn't want to be like this normal fashion designer, that you want to
Yeah.
be focused on the sustainability part of it as well. And what do you think about sustainable fashion right now, and how do people get into it? Like, how do people like people are very like want to buy cool stuff, buy clothes that make them look nice, but they don't, not a lot of them care about wanting, if thinking if it's sustainable or not.
Mm.
Will I look cool tonight? um will I be rocking to office tomorrow with this new suit? But like, how do people change, not people change, like how do people get more into sustainable fashion, and what can companies do, and what can people do? Yeah.
Yeah. I think first of all, like more and more people are aware of the issues around fashion. I
Yeah.
think most people would know that, there's sweatshops and there's bad
Mm.
labor practices and stuff like that within fast fashion. I feel like that's a pretty well-known fact. Whether you know the actual ins and outs of it, like that's
Mm.
not, most
Yeah.
people know. And so I think part of it is like there is, again, it's like so within our systems in our society that like going out shopping on the weekend or going out every week to see what's new is really normal. Like that's so normal, and is part of like the way that we socialize as well. Like we hang out
Yeah.
with friends, we go shopping, like that's the
Yeah.
way we do it. And now it's online. It's like, oh, well, you have emails coming in that tell you about new sales. You
Yeah.
have apps for your favorite brands. Like it's all just so natural to us.
Mm.
So I think that in some ways can override thinking deeper about it and thinking about, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure this is made badly. Maybe I should reconsider.
Yeah.
Um, Part of it is, it's a very nuanced conversation, because obviously part of it is accessibility. Like I live in a place where there are quite a few charity shops on my high street,
Mm.
and so I personally can go into them and avoid the big shops. But someone who lives maybe in the middle of nowhere might not have that access. And they also might be a plus size person, and that going to fast fashion might be their only opportunity to shop.
Yeah.
So there are all these different things that come into the conversation and how we look at sustainable fashion. Personally, the way I look at it is that we need to just consume less, and
Mm.
that should be the base of all of this. Often the conversation goes back to buying, like where do you shop if you want to be sustainable? What brands are good? When really we need to think about, why are we shopping? Like
Yeah.
what's driving my need to want to go shopping every weekend?
Mm.
Or why am I not just wearing what's already in my wardrobe for as long as I can? And so I think those are the questions that should be asked, because ultimately, brands like H&M, who might be talking more about sustainability, as long as they're producing millions of garments a year, we're not solving the problem. Doesn't matter
Mm.
how organic they are, doesn't matter what percentage of recycled polyester they're using. It doesn't matter unless they stop selling
Producing
as
so
much
much.
and we stop buying as much.
Yeah.
And so I think that should be the focus of the conversation. And I think in that, it kind of strips away a bit more of the kind of guilt element, because if people could be like, oh, actually, I'll just buy less, then even if they're buying a small amount, like a few
Mm.
garments a year, that's still better than what we're
Buying a lot.
doing currently. Yeah.
Yeah, like yeah, even I don't shop a lot, but I do have like I see a lot of people, all my friends, they like do shop a lot, and like we kind of need to change that um mindset in terms of like, okay, I'm just gonna buy a few things and I'm gonna use that for the whole year.
Mm.
Um, do you see like how do you like stop like it's all these major? How can major companies like change their approach? Because I think they're all profit focused. Like they all want to make profit, and they see fast fashion as the way to make a lot of profit. uh,
Mm.
and because either by outsourcing manufacturing to other countries like Bangladesh, India, Cambodia, and for a minimum wage, lower than minimum wage production, uh, like abuse in factories, everything like it all happens in the back end. And how do you like? How can major companies like these like how do these companies still exist and make you know change? How can they change? Like, is there any way that they can change,
Yeah.
or is it like yeah, these companies cannot exist in a very sustainable world? Should
Yeah.
not
I
exist
mean,
technically.
from my perspective, that is the answer. Like, they shouldn't exist. Like, we should
Yeah.
not live in a world where companies are selling millions of products a year. We should not live in a world that is focused on always looking hip and trendy. Like,
Mm,
that's not the world I want to live in. I want to
yeah.
live in a world where yeah, that's not our priority. So my answer would be, yeah, like, why do they have to exist?
Yeah.
I was at an event a while ago, and someone who I think they'd previously worked with a big company with like H&M, and they were kind of explaining some of the reasons why sustainability is quite difficult, and it's to do with kind of how different parts of their company work together and how disconnected it all is. And I was kind of just like, there's a solution there, is that
Mm,
they fix that problem and they make sure it's more connected and that all those dots are joined up. Like, that is
okay.
the solution. It's not difficult. They're just choosing not to. And so when people ask, like, well, they could, I think they're actually doing quite well, you should give them a break. It's like, no, they're not. They're just choosing not to. Like you said, like, they are choosing profit over sustainability. They are choosing profit over the climate crisis. And so, yeah, I mean, I've already said it. My answer would be they could just
Destroy
choose to not
not
exist.
exist. Yeah, I mean, and a lot of greenwashing and stuff. Like they say they're sustainable at this, but then they're actually not.
Yeah.
And marketing a very different thing than what they're actually doing. Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree with you. um, like how do we make it more scalable though? Like sustainable fashion. Like I think right now it's still uh like people are willing to buy like secondhand clothes and stuff like that, and especially in the UK, there are a lot of charity shops around, and you can go to and buy secondhand clothes. But what do you think is like the more, because I see like everything interconnected, like capitalism, then we have fast fashion, they're all connected. That the whole our whole society is connected to that. But then if company like charity shops aren't meant to be a big thing, like they are not meant to be scalable, and they're not meant to feed a whole country of clothes. They're just there for like a certain group of people. So how do we make it like more scalable? Like how do we change that? Maybe it's like a societal change, but maybe how do we
Hmm.
make a
It's a
difference?
good question. I think firstly, like, the more people who do like, have sustainable practices or are paying their workers the right amount of money, like, the cheaper it gets to actually do that, because
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's how it works.
Yeah, yeah.
um, and secondly, like, I think that's interesting you say that, like, charity shops aren't supposed to, like, be for an entire population to use, but
Yeah.
actually, like, we have enough clothes that if we turned off the tap on
Hmm.
fashion, we'd be okay for a while, like, for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And so I actually kind of think, no, like, we could live off of secondhand shops, whether it's from just the amount of clothes that are already in circulation, or whether it's like we share our clothes out, things like that. Like, why can't we see a
Hmm.
society where actually the high street is all shops full of secondhand things, or lending services? Like, there's the library of things where you can like hire like a sewing machine and take it back, and like things like this. Like, why can't we have a world where it's based on that kind of economy? And so yeah, that would be my question for you. Why can't we have that? Especially like you look at,
Yeah.
I went to America a few years ago, and their thrift shops are huge. They
Huge.
are
Yeah, they're huge.
giant warehouses of endless clothes. And it's like
Oh yeah.
there's so many clothes out there that
Yeah.
people could wear. If we didn't have trends and we didn't have fast fashion brands telling us like this is what you should look like, I think that would massively help as well, because you'd go into a charity shop and everything would look like a good opportunity to wear. We wouldn't have
Mm.
marketing telling us that that's ugly or that color isn't right or whatever.
We should have like large thrift shops in UK, like
Yeah, I
really
would love
huge one.
that.
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool. Because but yeah, having large thrift shops, then I can't think of anything else. Maybe maybe I'll think about it. But uh, recently there was I want to talk to you about this. There was the IPCC report
Mhm.
which released in the latest one. What are your um thoughts on that? And is it just like a more I, when I read it, like I felt like it was just a more dull version of what I read like in the last report,
Mm.
and all of it was just saying high confidence, high confidence, high confidence. Uh,
Yeah, I think so the first report is about oh my gosh, let me get this right. The first report, what's the first report? It's
was
about kind of
nice.
like the science
Uh,
behind it, right? And then the second report is how it's playing out in terms of climate
okay.
impacts. And then the third one, which will be out in April, is about what we can do about it.
Hmm.
And so yeah, like the second one is kind of a bit doom and gloom, because it's basically saying it's gonna get worse.
Yeah.
And this is how it's gonna get worse. And so yeah, I haven't like I'm not gonna read that report in
Oh
full because
yeah.
I don't understand scientific jargon. I've read like
Yeah.
the headline
Headlines
snippets.
summary.
Yeah. Um, and yeah, it's not great. But I think like the way I'm kind of looking at it is like if we can make this information accessible, like hopefully people get more of an understanding of how bad it's going to get. And sometimes we need that kind of fear element, because at least for me that's what made me get into action, was like, oh, this is scary. And so I actually was just recently part of a group of activists. We were working on an Instagram campaign.
Hmm.
We used the hashtag code red act now, which was referencing the first report.
Yeah.
um, and basically just made these like 60-second videos to share kind of bite-sized versions of what was in the report. So like I spoke about how extreme weather events are going to
Hmm.
get worse and they can cause things like disease and death and stuff like that. And that now we have proof that it is the cause of climate change and human
Hmm.
induced climate change. And so yeah, I think doing things like that and making these sorts of reports actually quite accessible is really important, because
Yeah.
otherwise people are going to see kind of mainstream media headlines being like the world is over, we are dying. Like yeah, it
Give-
might happen if we don't do anything, but hey, look, we actually can do stuff by doing
Yeah.
XYZ.
Yeah. The headlines are just meant to show um it's like clickbait. So people they
Yeah,
just want people to
exactly.
see. But yeah. Uh yeah, when I read it, was like, yeah, I was like I was reading it, I was like, okay, okay, I know this, I know this, I know this, I know this. Yeah, it's just like a reaffirmation of what's gonna happen. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I
but
actually I read something recently. I don't know if it was like, I don't know where it was, but someone was saying like, as climate people, in air quotes, or people who are quite knowledgeable of this stuff, or activists who focus on it all the time, I think sometimes if you are one of those people, like it's good to question what is actually the point of rereading all of this stuff,
hmm,
unless there's like a new piece of information, or you're reading about maybe an angle on it that you hadn't heard of before, like whether it's from like indigenous people or people in the global south who are most affected, like listening to their story is super important. But actually like rereading these headlines over and over again, I don't need to hear it again. Like,
Yeah.
I think if you focus on it all the time, there's no real benefit other than it's just gonna make you feel worse. And so
Hmm.
sometimes I think we need to actually check ourselves and be like, what is actually the point of me sitting down and reading a whatever it was, like 3,000 page
Yeah.
report? Like, there's no, I'm not a scientist. It's gonna go
Yeah.
in my brain, confuse me, and go out the other way.
Yeah. You don't really understand what you're reading. Also, sometimes you're like, you don't completely, it doesn't make
Yeah.
complete sense to you. You're like, okay, you read some scientific jargon. Okay, like, what does that mean?
It's almost like we're just reading it to reaffirm that it's
Yeah.
really bad. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, actually, I don't need to do that. I know it's bad.
But yeah, but I think they like talked about the mental health game aspect this time as well, that it affects gonna cause a lot of climate anxiety and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which is that's something that I think that was interesting to add. Um,
Yeah. I mean, if people are going through weather events that are extremely traumatic, like hurricanes and stuff,
mm,
like you're going to have people with PTSD, and that is
yeah.
mental health issues. Like, you can't ignore that aspect of it at all.
Mm. It's almost like climate change is connected to every problem we have in the
Mhm.
world. It's like
I think
it
once,
go
oh,
ahead. No,
I
I'll
was going to
go.
say, like, yeah, I think once you have opened your eyes to it, you can't ignore how it is in
Yeah.
you.
Sorry, like my Wi-Fi
Oh, I
just
lost you for a second.
no, my Wi-Fi just got disconnected for some reason.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
you
next,
can
but
carry on. Don't worry.
no, I was saying it's connected to like every problem. So it's also it's like a rabbit hole. You go inside it, and there's like all these different paths that lead you to one thing, and you realize it represents a whole society in a way that
Mm,
it connected to this problem. Okay, why do we have climate change? Maybe it's because of we have a society where we started with the industrial revolution, and then it got worse, worse, and worse, and then the way we operated like capitalism and stuff like that doesn't help our issue
yeah.
of with climate change. It really makes it worse. We need to change our whole perspective on different things. Maybe that's why I also think that sometimes if you have an if you lived on another planet, yeah, maybe we can make that like a society different. Like maybe we can have a different sort of like governance. Like we don't have to have like a full capitalistic society. We can have something else, a better
Yeah.
version of it, or something like
But we don't have to do that on another planet. We can do that
it.
here.
We can do it here, but it's almost like so hard to change. It's like a full revolution we require, like
Oh yeah.
different,
Yeah.
and
That's
then
me every day. I'm like, where's the revolution?
yeah, and people need to uh be accepting of that, and obviously people in power are not going to be happy with that. And it's also funny that the people in power are the ones we're trying to convince to make a difference. Uh, the people who are trying to convince to make a difference are the people who will be least vulnerable to climate change, like the people in power. They won't be as vulnerable as people on other ends of society, like the government, everyone. They are going to be probably the least affected by it, and we're trying to convince them to make the change. So,
Mm.
yeah,
It's a big uphill battle that we have to go on. And
um,
yeah.
and but you're like a content creator, like,
Mhm.
and how has that like been for you, and being in that field of
Tricky. I mean, it's not tricky in the sense of like, again, like I'm most passionate about it. I wouldn't want to be talking about anything else, but it comes with a lot of dilemmas. um,
mm,
like just today, like I get opportunities come up where it's like it could be quite good for me and my name, maybe, or financially quite good. But then it comes with a load of cons of like, you're going to have to align yourself with this company, and this company
mm,
has done this bad thing or doesn't quite align with how you view sustainability. And it's like, that seems like it should be a really easy answer, like, oh, you just don't work with them. But
yeah.
again, we live in a society, and within that society, I have bills to pay and a
Yeah.
roof to keep over my head. And so I come up against these dilemmas all the time of like,
Mm,
what do I say yes to this and pay my rent, or do I say no and be a bit stressed?
yeah.
And so like there's lots of those sorts of things that come with it. But again, like I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. Like the fact that I get to share climate education essentially like as a
Mm,
job and create art for climate is
mm,
like I couldn't ask for a better thing to do. Doesn't bring in a lot of money and and stuff like that, but again, like I think once you understand like the severity of the crisis, like you will try your best to do everything you can to avoid contributing to it, even if you're not perfect. Like I
mm.
recycle, but I still use single-use plastic, and I have family abroad, so there's a chance I will have to continue flying every now and again and things like that.
Mm,
So it's tricky. But
yeah,
I think we live in a society which makes it tricky
but doing this job makes you happy, right? And like,
most of the time, yes.
yeah, because like it's something I also want to get into, but I don't like necessarily see like it does like when you ask me like I'm a computer science student and I have this like life kind of like set for me. Oh, I'm gonna work as a software
Mm,
engineer at this company and stuff like that. But I also
yeah.
do like it's so hard to like think of like focusing on climate change because obviously sometimes, as you said, it doesn't like always pay the bills and you have a family you have to worry about and
Mm,
so it almost like we have a lot of like problems on the ground that we can't focus on another problem and it takes like a lot of willpower
mm,
um to make a change in your life to okay be focus on this issue just like I'm going to be focusing on this issue make this my priority for my rest of my life. It
yeah.
requires like a lot of willpower and that's why I respect all of you honestly like
Thank you.
yeah.
No, it definitely takes that. And like, I was, for example, that piece of work, like I go to like my friends and my family, I'm like, what should I do? And then some people will be like, just do it. Like you need the
Yeah.
money. Or you'll have people who be like, they're terrible, don't do it. And
Mm,
so like, yeah, it takes a lot. And I think what I'm very lucky with is that I'm also doing like illustration, which is something
mm,
that is not necessarily super climate impactful. Like as long as I
yeah.
work with good people, like I'm very lucky in that sense. Um, but you have to do what you can within your own like privilege and do what you
Mm,
can within your own limitations. Like there are people who are just trying to make ends meet, and there's no judgment on them whatsoever. Like a single if you're a single mom just trying to feed your kids,
mm,
I like hats off to you. That's
yeah.
enough of a job on your own. And so, yeah, again, all of these conversations have nuance to them, and you have to do what you got to do. Again, keep saying it, but we live in a society.
Yeah, we live in a society. Uh, That's the line of this whole episode. We live in a
Yeah.
society. Um, but like, so like, who do you look up for? Like inspiration. Who do you like look up
Mm,
to? And like
I
yeah,
I've always like struggled with that question because I've never really had one person who has
or multiple
inspired
people.
me the most. Yeah, it's always been multiple people, and I think it's always been interesting when occasionally like I'll be put on lists of people like who'll be the Greta Thunbergs of the UK or whatever, and it's like I don't like I don't want to get cancelled for this, but as I appreciate
No
what
worry.
Greta does and everything like that, but she's never been my inspiration. Like the
Yeah.
inspirational people to me are people like within my local community who are doing good
Hmm.
things, or um, people on the front lines who are trying to protect like their natural spaces or like their sacred lands, and people who are like genuinely like fighting for their lives in this fight. um and so I will always take more inspiration from multiple people than I ever will of one. And I think again that speaks to like the media sphere and how individual it is, and how we think one person is going to save us when actually no, it has to be a collective effort. And so I will never say one name or give one name because it will never be that answer to me.
Like not even like in the climate movement, like Greta Thunberg, you would see her as inspiration, or you won't. Like in the climate movement, just like in like
Oh
she's
yeah,
like
no,
leading.
No. I think I don't have one.
Oh, but she does go on strike every like week or so, like Greta Thunberg, and then she's always like there in front of the parliament and making sure. So I really
Yeah,
respect
no,
that out of her.
no, like yeah, for sure, definitely. I respect everyone who's
Hmm.
doing stuff for climate. Like we need everyone. So
Yeah.
anyone who's doing anything is good in my books.
Okay, I don't want to take any more of your time, but I have one last question. Like,
Mhm.
I remember, like, in your podcast, like you said, you wanted to have a dream guest, like someone
Mm.
who would be a dream guest in your podcast. I just want to ask right now.
Ooh, I can reel off a whole list. I would love to have someone like Kim Stanley Robinson on my podcast, who's an amazing author and writes cli-fi, and I
Hmm.
just think that would be really cool. Eric Holthouse, who wrote the book The Future Earth, which kind of inspired my
Uh-huh.
podcast, and also Mary Annie Hegler, who is a climate writer, and I just think she's really funny and wonderful. So yeah, I'd love to have her on as well.
Yeah, and I just want to say good luck to your podcast. I hope you get these people on, and
Thank you.
I know you're making a big difference in the world. Uh,
Thank you.
and you inspire a lot of people. So I think just go ahead, do uh, be you, and do your best. And everyone, please check out Idealistically Pod and Tolmeia Gregory. Uh, and yeah, I'll. This is the end of the episode. Thank you for having
Thank you
coming
very
here.